All right. Hey, everybody. Um, Sorry this is a little bit late. For those of you that are in human factors programs and have taken ergonomics, I had a bout of de Quervain's tenosynovitis in my thumb. So it was pretty weird to try to navigate uh, some of the work I was doing this week with a splint on, um, but it's definitely getting better. Um, yeah, so we're going to go into task analysis now. This is going to be the first of the series of tools that we'll cover. And like I said before, I'll probably spend a week on each because they can be a bit difficult to like understand how to implement in those things, especially, for some of you that might be going into like the human factors or honestly even like a safety process or not process, but program. Sometimes task analysis is loosely talked about, but the kind of how to isn't really explained. So hopefully we can get into some of that. So recapping a little in the Slack. So it looks like this last week, Jamie and Elise are the only two that have put up their stuff for last week. So get your posts up about your particular event, as soon as you can there. But looking through these, yeah, the Surfside building collapse, Jamie, I think that's going to be really interesting because, like, for example, I don't even know if you're going to have corrective actions to even talk about, right? Because these this might involve regulations or laws that take significantly longer than the next 6 to 7 weeks to cover. But still, I think it's good that we look at recent things in that. And yeah, some of the surprises that the warning signs that appear to be ignored. Yes, I would recommend if you look up, I can't remember his name. I want to say his last name was like Hamburger or something. It was something crazy. There's a structural engineer in San Francisco of a condo building that's having a similar problem, but they're a little bit more proactive, it seems like. You might end up branching out into just the nature of business in Florida and kind of some of those challenges too. Um, but yeah, it's still very, very important there. And Elise, yeah, so we have another flight here. I agree with some of the concerns about cause and contributing factors. Because even then, the findings of probable cause, when we talk about a problem statement or a causal statement, right? You only pick one and you don't smush a bunch of them together. So the captain didn't properly monitor the fuel state. That's a cause. Didn't respond to the low fuel state. That's another cause. And the crew members' advisories regarding the fuel state. That's another cause. Um, Physical cause, here we go. This resulted in fuel exhaustion to all engines. That's probably our physical cause. Um, and then his inattention resulted from preoccupation with the landing gear malfunction and preparations for a possible landing emergency. Those are two more causes. So, I hope you're seeing that a lot of times in these reports, right, they're pretty messy in terms of how they just smush everything together. And it also could be the nature of these reports. There might be an internal NTSB formal cause analysis document that isn't released that might capture some of those things. But you're not necessarily wrong that if the landing gear light wouldn't have malfunctioned, then his attention at least would have been free. Now, the one thing we can't say is that he then would have attended to the fuel state because he even didn't respond to the crew members' advisories, which I thought was strange. Like, what does that mean? If someone's like, "Hey, we're running out of fuel," they are, however, probably simultaneous somewhat too, right? If maybe he is worried about the fuel state, well, he has to land to refuel, and he feels like he can't land. So that could be a human error, like perfect storm. But still, that's something I want you guys to think about. And then also, if everybody could kind of just report on a post or within one of these or a comment or wherever you want to put it, just how you're feeling about corrective actions in general. As you've read through them, are you seeing them? Are they jumping out at you pretty well? Do you feel like you could write one yourself? those kind of things. Corrective actions can be tricky, but they're also the only way that the accidents can stop happening. Okay, so going back, so why do we do a task analysis? The question we're essentially trying to answer is, did we set up the task? Live edits here, guys. And user for success. So is this process designed in such a way that somebody can actually do it right? That's a challenge. So task analysis, definition-wise, is a systematic process to evaluate how a task is performed. What does success look like? What are the feedbacks for success or failure? How do your users know whether they did it right or wrong? And what factors influence performance? Then we have the pros and cons of task analysis. So task analysis you would use when task construction is critical to success and error points are unclear. A lot of these accidents you all have chosen are very complex, so these specific error points can be kind of problematic. That's partially why we go into some of these tools, because when you start going through these steps, then it makes a lot more sense. And one thing I should just let everybody know and go back kind of somewhat, the next iteration of our PowerPoint slides on the accidents, I'm going to ask for specific slides on some of the methods. So you can talk about if they were done in there, but I also want you to try your hand at doing a few of them yourself with that event and see if you find something different. So anyway, so you would use task analysis if the way the task is set up or completed is critical to success, and if error points are unclear, so you can't immediately tell where everything went awry. You use it to break a task into subtasks. It's a good way to identify what should have happened in a perfect successful situation. And it's also used to easily identify deficiencies in training, procedures, and procedure adherence. Keep in mind, training, procedures, and procedure adherence would be less effective corrective actions generally, but redesigning a process might be more effective. Some of the advantages, it'll familiarize you with the task. It helps to identify where the problems occurred specifically as you kind of step through it in a systematic way. And it can inform many different type of mitigations or corrective actions. Now, some negatives of task analysis. So it can be time consuming. That's one of the biggest ones, is doing a thorough task analysis is not a quick process usually. Walkthrough task analysis is the most effective. And so we'll get into those in a little bit, but a walkthrough task analysis is when you essentially go out with your clipboard to the field or to the location of the task's performance, and you watch it be done and you note every single step. But it's effective if performed with the personnel normally responsible with that task, which might be difficult to arrange, especially when we think about accident issues, right? Jamie, the Surfside building collapse is a good example of that, right? Well, we can't do a walkthrough task analysis of the steps that should have been taken for that building because the building is no longer there. That's part of a difficult thing that sets you already into a harder place to do task analysis. Still totally possible, but you're missing the easiest way to do it. Can be difficult to complete without firsthand experience. Now, this could be firsthand experience via a walkthrough task analysis, or you could do dirty job style. You're going to go do it with a trainer, or even interviews though can be key. You definitely need some kind of engagement though. Doing it just from procedures, unless you have very high levels of subject matter expertise, you're going to have a hard time parsing out, like, okay, when they do this step, they actually do X, Y, and Z, because you just know that. The other problem, and this is kind of the biggest risk of task analysis to me, that's why I would never recommend doing it by itself and only using that tool. But you lose the forest for the trees frequently, which is a problem considering our system causation issue. So you can tend to get really absorbed into task errors, and it's sometimes difficult to step back to what about the system causation, things that are at play either with those task errors or things that are affected by those task errors. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, some steps in task analysis. You're going to define the scope of the task analysis. So this is where you capture what tasks are you interested in, conditions, what procedures, etc. Some of the aircraft incidents we've had, okay, doing a task analysis of a normal flight might give you your optimal scenario, but you really need to see, okay, what are the steps somebody takes when, for example, this landing gear light is broken for your post lease. So you want to make sure you define exactly what you're going for. Then you collect the task data. This is going to be observations, interview-based, talk or walkthroughs. You then have to interpret the collected data. This is where the different types of task analysis will come into play. You will identify error or failure points. This is where the immediate things of training failures, procedure issues, and those things will pop out. If the operator didn't do step 5 properly, okay, well, why not? The training says that they had it, etc. Oh, they reported they missed that training or whatever. Okay, that's a problem. That's something to capture there. And again, remember, your prescription can't just be more training. I know I harp on that a lot, but I come from the nuclear world where everything is train and procedure all day long. And that's usually not going to be a good solution. So different task analysis methods. So we talked about this with interpret collected data. So these are the big 4, but there's other variants and things like that. And this is usually one of the bigger challenges in doing a task analysis is people throw around the term task analysis. And that's it. They don't give you any more information, which is a problem because each of these methods will give you they don't give you different results. They give you a different angle to look at the steps that you took or the steps of the task or etc. And so they are used for different issues. So it's important that you start to understand early and start capturing and forming causal factors and contributing factors so that then you can know, okay, what are the features that are most important? Treat it almost right. Task analysis and all of these methods are going to be ways to both identify issues or errors or problems in the process. They're also going to be used to possibly validate some existing ideas you have, almost like a hypothesis. So, if you expected that, like Elise, you put in here that you think the design is and mechanical failure is a problem there, blaming that versus blaming humans. Yeah, and also remember from our first couple lectures, right? If your root cause is human error, you didn't do a good enough job. Most humans don't try to screw up constantly. They screw up because of conditions. But when you're capturing design and those things, that will, if you have an inkling that that's what you want, that's what you're thinking it's going to be, the selection of your task analysis method might help you validate or disprove that, especially if you're trying to see okay, this is what everybody else is saying. I think it's this. Let's do a task analysis and see what shakes out. But you definitely want to do the right one. So the 4 methods here are hierarchical task analysis, tabular task analysis, link analysis, and then applied cognitive task analysis. So hierarchical task analysis, this is the top-down method. So what does that mean? That means that you are starting from the big picture and you're going down. You're starting with the forest to get to the trees. So you're going to begin with the broader goals and then break them down into subtasks. You can dig in at different depths. That will vary. That was something that we've captured a few different things in this class about that might be more sensitive to experience and those kind of things. That this is one of those. And they're not particularly great for communication issues or extra task issues. When I say that, I don't mean additional tasks. I mean extra in the sense of extraneous, so things that are outside of the task. This might be organizational problems or some of those. It's not going to immediately jump out at you. But to kind of see, this is the one benefit of doing this right in the raw one. I'm going to blow this up a little bit so I can walk you through it. So if our goal is warm the furnace, that's the goal. So then we make a plan. We have to do these various things. Okay, we have this plan now. But what do we do for this? Okay, we got to go do down here. And now, okay, we did all that. We go up to 2, done, 3, done, 4. Oh, okay, we got a bunch of things to do here. So this is how a hierarchical task analysis would do. So for example, let's think of one that's not too huge, and keep in mind, a lot of these examples will not withstand almost any scrutiny because they're pretty minimal. But so if we assume our goal here, right, is to make sure a plane is fueled. Okay, what do we have to do? We have to monitor I'm assuming a fuel gauge somewhere. There may likely be some computational predictive, you know, how your car will turn on the light and some cars will say you have X amount of miles left, assuming there's one like that going on. You then have to identify a landing location, reach out to the air traffic control stations or anything like that. So there's a lot of steps to that, right? And each one of them will have their own sub-steps. So this is how you would do with the hierarchical task analysis. This is one of the more common ones you'll see. I think because it's a little bit easier to see. And then when you get to the very bottom is when you're looking at, like, if your root cause was living somewhere, it would probably live deeper in this task analysis. So, and what you'll start to see, right, is you'll start to see, especially as you examine what actually happened in your accident, you'll start to see what they didn't do. And you can mark them however you want. A lot of people do this in a group activity with like sticky notes on a whiteboard, and then you might have different colored sticky notes or something. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but yeah, you would go through this with all the task steps that you're there. And then, you know, let's say this was our goal. And then when we get there, there is another set, then you would start down that next chain. But yeah, hierarchicals, I would say one of the more common ones that you'll see. Next is tabular task analysis. So this one you won't see as often. And I think the reason for that, sorry, I had a cough there. I think the reason for that is it's harder to read, honestly. That's one of the biggest issues. So this is our bottom-up method for task analysis. So this would be you start with trees to get to the forest. You're going to begin at the subtask or basic action level. That means we're down here. So especially in hierarchical task analysis, right? This might be a good enough clarity, but let's say ensure plant is ready. I mean, how do you do that? That's not an action. You have to do things to ensure. Ensure is a cognitive concept. It's not an action. So then what do we have to do? We have to check X, Y, and Z. To check X, we have to physically navigate to that spot on the control board and look at the valve or something. That type of level is what you're looking at for a tabular task analysis. So you begin with those and then you start building up as you get there, as you kind of dig in through. It's incredibly detailed. It's going to capture your cognitive steps and decision making well. It will capture task support and communication issues. So, one of your steps might be tell your partner something, or in the case of, again, of the flight, tell the pilot, hey, I'm seeing that we're out of fuel. that stuff you will capture here mainly because the issue is if you start at a hierarchical sense, right, you're looking at what's supposed to happen. Well, of course, the other crew members are supposed to inform the pilot if they're running out of fuel, but it's not necessarily defined in the hierarchical task analysis. We're starting with what the goal needs. So it just shows that kind of contrast. But it can be very time consuming. And because at the end of the day, you get these big old tables and spreadsheets, it can be kind of hard to read, especially if you're not familiar either with tabular task analysis or the just overall process. It's definitely one of those where the skill of the person doing it will affect how coherent it is. So that's definitely something to consider. But you might notice in some of your accident reports, either this one or even the first round, is you might have seen some of these in appendices usually. So the next thing is the link analysis. So this isn't exactly what a link analysis is. This is more of a hierarchical one, but I can capture kind of what I'm thinking here with this. So this is intermediary method. It kind of lives between the tasks. It's focused on links between tasks. So this is going to give you your information on any communication steps, any interactions between processes and systems, and useful for teaming situations or complex handoffs or reliance. So if you're relying on somebody else to do something, link analysis would capture that. So this is our hierarchical task analysis, right? We have subtasks for each of these, and then we have our goal. Well, when we talk about open Pinterest, go to save boards, tap on game day cooking board. Okay, a link analysis would focus on the interactions here, right? So open Pinterest, they were successful because they know how to, they have that interaction is well designed, etc. Tap on game day cooking board. Okay, they could navigate to it, they could select it, they could find it. Tap on this recipe again, taps right there. Then tap make it to open the recipe webpage. Read through the ingredients and the instructions. So as you can see, there are these interactions between these steps. And if we go back to our furnace, there are interactions as we go through here. Ensure the plant is ready, ensure gas oil is available, ensure O2 analysis system is working. If there are communication points, what if you ensure the plant is ready, but you have to ask somebody about gas oil? If this is not done with one person, then a link analysis would be focusing on those intermediary steps. So it can be really, really useful and really interesting, especially in instances where like I said, where you've got those teams or really high levels of complexity in those kind of aspects. But it's kind of important as you kind of go through to look at that. And I'll do this for next week's lecture too. I was still looking for a good example of a link analysis. I found one, but I can't in a work report, but I can't share it. So I'm trying to find a good example of one. But it essentially it would follow or could follow the same rough method that you're doing here. Just the topic is going to be these links, the steps between these. And then lastly, applied cognitive task analysis. So this is, especially if you look up task analysis in the last couple decades, this is the big one you'll see a lot. This was specifically created to capture the specific cognitive demands of the task. So this captures your information needs. Cognitive demands and error traps are apparent. They will become very obvious when you do this step. And cognitive supports like decision aids will be captured. So especially that's a huge part there, because especially what if, most of our situations now, just throughout our life include technology in some kind. So most of these tech systems are decision support systems fundamentally. So we can capture that with link analysis, right? Oh, if you're going to do this, then you have to, rely on you might capture it up here of like, oh yes, the decision support tool is the thing that told them to do this next step or checked off the that the gas oil was available, those kind of things. But this will capture specifically, what's the decision made supposed to do for us cognitively? Did it or not? And why? Does the decision support fail because wasn't trained on this particular situation, so it doesn't have any support to give? Did the operator not know how to use it very well? Those kind of aspects. And you'll capture this a lot. The good thing with this too is if you go out there to kind of look up examples, there's a lot out there. It's been very well publicized and stuff. And it makes sense, right? When we're talking about human error stuff, most people, if we give them a recipe or certain steps to follow, as long as those steps are written well, they can follow them with high levels of precision and accuracy. There'll always be some baseline human error there, but in general, you can always follow those steps. So we're really interested when we look at human error in, okay, most human error happens outside of those defined steps. So what happened that caused our human error? And human error is a cognitive function. So what's going on there? And this will help you capture that, where the others won't necessarily. The others, what you'll see cognitive components kind of lurking in the background or around the situation, but it won't become like immediately apparent in those. So it's definitely a good tool to have in your toolbox, especially as you're looking at high stress or not accident, but extreme situations or abnormal situations that by definition kind of fall outside of that procedural focus. And that's kind of task analysis. It's hard because, the best way to learn about task analysis is to do one. So, like I said, I'm going to want that for part of your next PowerPoints. What I would recommend is you pick one task in your events. Don't go overboard or pick something really crazy. Pick something that is reasonable in scope for you to do. Pick your method here and then start going through it. And don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about, churning out something at an expert level, because no matter what, these tools, they're never applied in the same way twice. Every situation's different. The different levels you might capture at, are different. Because, if you're doing a tabular task analysis here, you could go down to the person push the button, and then to push the button, they have to go through these basic actions, lift their arm, orient themselves, extend their arm, apply force to a set object, those kind of things. You can go really deep if you want, but it's important to kind of realize like no task analysis is ever perfect. It's never going to capture everything. It's a tool to help you do your job, and to try to make sure that you're capturing everything as best you can. But so yeah, pick a part of your task and just start thinking about it. If you get stuck on that particular part, or if you're really not sure, let me know, especially before next lecture if you can. Because if we need to spend a little bit more time in task analysis, and I know that, I can come up with a simple task and we can do one live on the lecture and then kind of see if that works. So we might do that anyway, not sure. So we'll kind of play around with that. But if it makes sense, great. Then next week's assignment. Okay, so just keep commenting. And, I know we have Elise and Jamie's events, so that means we've got, what is that, 3 more? Yeah, we have 3 more people, just need to put their stuff in and then just start commenting back and forth, especially if you know something about those incidents, see if you find interesting resources out there, share them with everybody. I put on here, discuss the corrective action post, but I think most of you actually did that. That was one of the parts of this I wrote before. Because, what I would say is, let's see, we got Jamie and Elise's corrective actions. Oh, and Todd there. So we might need ones from Derek and Shane. I also could be wrong as I'm reading this, so don't quote me on that if I missed one. But comment on those, explore, you all kind of have this baseline or greater knowledge of each of these accidents. So were there any corrective actions you noticed that maybe they didn't catch or different things like that? And then just post something there about, what's an example of a corrective action you see in your normal life. So this could be, you know, don't just settle on like a stop sign, but if there's something unique that you interact with regularly that you can tell now is probably the result of some kind of a corrective action, what is that? And then what do you think what's the cause it's trying to correct? If you know, or if you don't, take a guess and just try to have fun with it. This is especially great if you have kids because your whole life is corrective actions when you're a parent. So just kind of keep that in mind there, but it can help you again realize what corrective actions are, and that a lot of these things I hope you're noticing are almost ingrained in how we interact with events and just situations in our daily life. So you'll see these things that just are everywhere. Once you start seeing them, you almost can't not see them. It's interesting. So anyway, that's it again. Sorry for the delay getting it up. Um, and next week, I think we'll plan on moving to barrier analysis, but I don't know. We might spend some more time on task analysis, especially if it's needed. So uh, we'll just have to go from there. All right. Then this was it. I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good week next week. Thanks.